2022 has been a wild ride in the gaming industry, filled to the brim with heavy-hitting AAA releases and precious indie darlings alike. As usual, everyone will have their own personal picks for their favorite game, but I think we can all agree only one of the two games are leaving with the award for Game of the Year 2022. These two games are obviously Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok. Both massive games have a large and expansive world and a gripping narrative, while having an altogether different approach to gameplay, storytelling, and exploration. Now, before we start, it's safe to mention that the true Game of the Year is largely based on what you enjoy more. Don't let this video dictate your preference on what your Game of the Year might be. Also, if you're from the crowd who derive validation from seeing your favorite game win so you could trash the other game, then this video is probably not for you.
Bitch, yeah.
Both God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring are labors of love made by people with a strong vision and passion for what they were doing. It would be in poor faith to bring either game down just for the sake of favoring another. So without further ado, let's get started. Elden Ring came out on 25th February and took the world by storm. Marketed as an open-world Dark Souls, the game has gone on to live up to every iota of its promise and then some. Elden Ring turned out to be a new milestone in gaming that is still being talked about months after its launch, something that doesn't really happen for most modern releases. The game instantly drew players in with a gorgeous and expansive world where every crevice and every orifice oozes with history. Every crack a story, every blemish a forgotten tale. God of War Ragnarok, on the other hand, is the ultimate conclusion of Kratos' journey that started on the PS2, concluding a long and bloody saga of vengeance, fatherhood, and redemption amidst the ultimate war between the gods. It's a heartfelt story that greatly expands the scope of the world that we only glimpsed in God of War 2018. It takes everything that worked in the previous game and refines and polishes it to be the best it possibly could be. However, instead of setting up a trilogy, it effectively concludes the series in just 2 games. For those of you who have played the previous Souls games, Elden Ring's gameplay feels very reminiscent to those games. It builds upon and significantly expands on the combat and gameplay loop of these previous games, with larger levels, new combat options, and a vastly expanded arsenal and movement system with Torrent. Elden Ring is quite literally Big Dark Souls, which is the strongest word of praise that can be given to any singular video game. A majority of Elden Ring would be spent on players exploring every nook and cranny of the game's densely packed world. Uncovering the rich history of the lands between becomes just as important as combat. God of War Ragnarok follows a similar path. Its gameplay is largely an iteration of its predecessor that takes the gameplay mechanics of 2018 and refines it as much as possible. The game has violent, satisfying combat, insane and challenging boss fights, and genuine, heartfelt storytelling.
Well, I recognize that dour expression anywhere. Care to tell me what went wrong?
The wolf is gone.
It's a largely linear experience where you fight, solve puzzles, explore, and watch insanely high-budget cutscenes.
Maybe one of these days I'll surprise you.
Well, you already have.
While Elden Ring might not be the game people might think of when they hear the word narrative, it definitely has one, and an extremely compelling one at that. The thing is, Elden Ring rarely ever tells a story to the player. It instead gives the player agency to discover its story at their own pace without constantly doling out cutscenes or dialogue. Now, it could be argued that Elden Ring's approach cannot really be considered storytelling. There are extremely few cutscenes, and the story that there is way too obtuse to seriously count. Yet Elden Ring had some of the most emotionally resonant moments of any of the games this year. Leading the charge against Radahn the Starscourge in the deserts of Caelid alongside a dozen other warriors will forever be one of the most memorable fights, and many of its bosses are supremely iconic. Ragnarok storytelling, on the other hand, is a lot more active, filled with engaging cutscenes, quality writing, and high-fidelity performance from talented actors. Both games take entirely different approaches to their storytelling that leave an equally strong impact. The Lands Between is a gorgeous landscape that houses distinctive locales that give each region its own flavor. From the oppressive, crimson-soaked sky in Caelid to the soft, ethereal charm of Liurnia, From Software's art team was killing it with Elden Ring, arguably making some of the most striking environments the series has seen to date. This is why, despite lacking in technical fidelity, Elden Ring makes up for its flaws with its scope and impressive art direction. God of War Ragnarok, on the other hand, has carefully curated vistas and painstaking detail put into its world. While the game doesn't boast a gargantuan scope of the lands between, it makes up for it with detailed, handcrafted environments and vistas. The art team was once again working overtime, probably quite literally considering the state of game development, to bring these environments to life. Seeing the results in the full game, they did a phenomenal job manifesting the cold cruelty of Norse myth. In conclusion, it is necessary to acknowledge the importance of both games. Elden Ring is an open-world juggernaut and a genre-defining experience in the gaming medium. The impressive scale and density of its world are going to be a fossil for knowledge for at least the next few years. On the other hand, God of War Ragnarok includes a long-running saga with a spectacular finish. It's an expensive, high-quality title that feels like a new Hollywood blockbuster, something that feels like a once-in-a-few-year feat in this industry. With that respect, however, the reasonable conclusion here is that the true game of the year is whatever you prefer. If you like linear stories with a carefully curated narrative, then God of War Ragnarok would likely be your game of the year. If you prefer large open worlds and have a keen sense for discovery and exploration, then very few games will enthrall you like Elden Ring.